Imagine holding your own severed humanity in your hands, right? Just looking down at the horrific, bubbling ruin of what used to be your face. And realizing the only logical response left in the world is to just start laughing.
I mean, that is a wildly dark image to start with.
It totally is. But usually when we consume a story, we're just skimming for the plot points. Who punched who stole what. It can feel like reading a grocery list of events.
Right, like a summary.
Exactly. But today, we are completely changing how you visualize a narrative. We are stepping into the role of your guides for a mental theater production.
Yes, we want you to really see the sets, feel the oppressive heat of the lighting shifts, and notice the deliberate, sickening splashes of color on the stage.
Because when you force your brain to paint the picture, when you map out the stage blocking in the shadows, you don't just passively hear a sequence of events.
No, you actively witness the psychological and, frankly, the physical breaking of a human being.
And the human being we are breaking down today is this wildly inventive, alternate universe reimagining of one of the most famous villains in literary and comic history, the Joker. Or, in this specific universe, he's known as Joe Kingman.
Joe Kingman,
Yeah.
right? And Harley Quinn is there, too.
Yeah, we are diving into a highly visual, incredibly visceral fan fiction origin story written by Dylan Brassington. So our mission for this deep dive is to guide you through this dark metamorphosis. We want to make you feel every chemical burn and every shattered mirror.
It's a very sensory experience.
It really is. Okay, let's unpack this. I want you to close your eyes, let the house lights in your mind go down, and just picture the opening set.
So the heavy velvet curtain rises on a farmhouse. It's sitting on the outskirts of a very small, very mundane town. And notice the color palette the director has chosen here.
Right, it's very specific.
It's deliberately drab, just muted browns, dusty wooden floorboards, suffocating grays. We are introduced to young Joseph, a boy who isn't surrounded by warm, cuddly pets.
No, not at all.
He is surrounded by stock. Creatures meant solely for labor or breeding or just the slaughterhouse. In this environment, death isn't a tragedy. It's just mechanical background noise. It's beige. It's totally routine.
And his family totally reflects that emotional barrenness. I mean, we see his father, Mark, who's an antique restorer. He spends his life fixing broken things, but he can't fix his own quiet despair.
Yeah, that irony is so heavy there.
And his mother, Helen, she bakes pies constantly, but never really seems to eat them. It's just this sea of suffocating brown and beige. But then, and this is great, the director gives us our first stark pop of color on the stage.
Oh, the berries.
Yes. Young Joseph comes walking onto the stage from the fields. He's been collecting currants for his mother's pie, and his lips and chin are heavily stained this deep, bruised red and violent purple.
Just from eating the berries.
Right. And his mother smiles and calls him Count Dracula.
It's a brilliant visual cue. It's our very first hint of the macabre painted onto the canvas of a child's completely innocent face.
Yeah, it's subtle, but it's there.
And the second pop of color is even more aggressive. It's an actual physical object. A gift from his emotionally distant father, uncovered from beneath an oily, dark red cloth in the dusty workshop.
Oh, the radio.
Yeah, a Boston 2000 FM radio. And the casing is this vibrant, shimmering, almost radioactive lime green. Against that dull, lifeless backdrop of the farmhouse, that lime green radio practically vibrates with energy.
It's basically a lifeline, isn't it? It represents a total intrusion of the outside world. Through the static of that green plastic box, Joseph discovers the voice of Professor Leroy Harvey.
Right, the historian.
Yeah, he's this upbeat, incredibly articulate historian with a really melodic, practiced cadence to his speech, and Joseph becomes entirely obsessed with this voice.
He really latches onto it.
He does. He starts physically mimicking Leroy's rhythm, plucking words out of the air with his fingertips, turning his posture all upright and theatrical. He decides this new, sophisticated persona needs a name, so he shortens Joseph to Joe.
And he realizes a character needs a costume. His mother, leaning into what she thinks is just normal childhood imagination, actually helps him construct it. They take scissors to these heavy old window curtains.
Which is such a striking image.
It is. Picture a miniature bespoke tuxedo. The jacket is a dark forest green with a rich, deep purple inner lining. He wears purple slacks held up by matching suspenders, a tight, sophisticated vest, and he covers his farm boots with crisp white fabric to mimic spats.
I'm trying to picture this sequence on a stage, and at first glance, the energy feels like a superhero suiting up montage. You know, that classic trope where the hero builds the armor to go fight the bad guys?
Right, like putting on the cape.
Yeah, but something feels much darker here. He's not building armor to fight crime. Isn't this more like a child building a theatrical armor to escape a life where animals are just stock and death is constant?
That is the precise mechanism at play, yeah.
What's fascinating here is that it begins as a standard coping mechanism, dissociation through play.
Makes sense for a kid in that environment. But because Leroy Harvey's radio broadcast provided this incredibly articulate, upbeat rhythm, Joe doesn't just pretend. He physically adopts the vocal cords and mannerisms of a performer.
He becomes the character.
Exactly. He turns his psychological escape hatch into a continuous, literal stage performance. By speaking in that rhythm, he floats above the grim, death-filled reality of the farm. He is basically untouchable as long as he is Joe.
But you know, a stage play can't survive on a peaceful first act alone. The illusion has to break. Imagine the stage physically revolving now. The bright, playful spotlight that was tracking Joe in his little tuxedo fades out completely.
Right, the mood shifts entirely.
We are pulled into Mark's antique restoration workshop, and the entire stage is suddenly bathed in a dim, dusty, oppressive red hue.
The visual warmth is just gone. It feels suffocating. Joe struts into the workshop fully in character, demanding his father's attention.
And Mark is just humoring him, right?
Yeah, Mark, humoring his son's bizarre new persona, picks up a thick, oily black paintbrush from his workbench. He playfully swipes it across Joe's powdered face, painting a literal, exaggerated ear-to-ear smile on the boy. Mark chuckles and dubs this new character Joe Kingman.
Joe Kingman. The name just locks into the boy's mind. He is absolutely enamored with the reflection. So much so that days later, wanting to recreate that exact moment of connection and theatricality, Joe sneaks back into that dim, red-lit workshop all by himself.
Wearing the full curtain tuxedo.
Yes, in the full suit. He finds what he assumes is the exact same brush sitting on the bench. He presses the bristles to the corner of his mouth and smears it aggressively across his cheekbones to draw the smile.
And this is where the sensory details plunge us straight into visceral horror.
Because that brush is not coated in oily black paint. It is soaking in euphonic acid. Now let's explain what that is in this universe, because it's not just a generic chemical.
Right, it's highly specific.
Euphonic acid is an industrial-grade paint stripper designed to rapidly dissolve complex chemical polymers. So imagine the immediate violent reaction on stage. The caustic liquid hits his skin, and within a fraction of a second, the flesh begins to aggressively blister and bubble.
It's immediate. Joe drops to the floor, screaming in absolute agony.
But the true horror is the chemical interaction we are witnessing. Joe is wearing thick theatrical makeup, stark white powder, and heavy, patchy black mascara.
And the euphonic acid doesn't just burn the skin away. It uses the heavy makeup as a binding agent.
Oh, God.
It melts the white and black pigments directly into the chemical compound of the acid, searing those colors straight into his exposed muscle tissue and deteriorating fat layers.
It's permanent.
Yes. It isn't just a burn. The acid is literally baking the grotesque black and white smile permanently into his raw, scarred facial structure.
The sound of his screaming echoes through the house. Helen, his mother, hears him and comes sprinting into the red-lit workshop in a totally blind panic. But the floor is slick. She trips, crashing into the workbench, and knocks over the entire open tin of the euphonic acid.
It spills over her like a heavy caustic syrup. It splashes directly onto the side of her head.
It's just devastating.
And the physical damage here is devastatingly precise. The acid scorches through her outer ear canal, burning deep into her inner ear, and physically damages the neural pathways in her brain.
So it actually affects her mind.
Exactly. That localized brain damage physically severs her emotional regulation centers. It fractures her mind instantly into two entirely distinct personalities, one that is desperately loving and one that is violently, unpredictably aggressive.
I keep thinking about the sheer cruelty of this moment. If we view this purely as a stage tragedy, the acid doesn't just burn flesh. It physically burns away their humanity.
That's a great way to put it.
So I have to ask, is this the moment Joe Kingman, the monster, is officially born, or is he just a victim here?
Well, it's a brilliant exploration of agency. The accident strips away his agency entirely. He didn't choose to be scarred. But you cannot walk through the world with a horrifying, permanent, grinning skull for a face and expect normal interactions.
Right, people are going to react to that.
The tragedy physically sealed him inside the character of Joe Kingman. The simple mistake of grabbing that brush seals their fates. That permanent smile becomes a grotesque mask he can never, ever take off.
Which catapults us into the next sequence. The oppressive red lighting of the workshop suddenly snaps off. The set changes drastically. We are thrust into a blindingly bright, stark white hospital room. White linoleum floors, white sheets, pale white walls.
The visual contrast should make your eyes ache. In the dead center of this sterile void sits Joe, wrapped entirely in thick medical bandages like a mummy.
And he won't speak, right?
He refuses to speak a single word because the skin around his mouth is so tight and damaged that every syllable pulls at his healing, burning flesh.
And the only splash of color on this entire blinding white stage happens when Joe cries. Because his tear ducts were severely scalded by the acid, they bleed.
Such a haunting image.
He cries these watered-down, pale red tears of blood that slowly drip down and stain the pristine white bandages and bedsheets. Then the door opens, and a sharp clinical spotlight hits a new character, Dr. Kent.
Now, for anyone familiar with the broader mythology, this is where the alternate universe elements heavily intertwine. Dr. Kent is a neurorehabilitation psychologist, and we learn very quickly that he has a wife and 2 young sons. Their names, Clark and Bruce.
I mean, what a wild twist. But Dr. Kent is not a benevolent healer here. He looks at this bandaged, broken boy and does not see a patient. He sees a biological gold mine. He sees a test subject.
He really does.
We are introduced to a terrifying piece of medical staging called the cleansing chair. Dr. Kent straps Joe in and drops him backwards into a massive stainless steel tub filled with a thick, luminescent, glowing green goop. The stark white lighting of the hospital room suddenly shifts to a sickly, radioactive chemical green.
We need to understand the pseudoscience of what Dr. Kent is doing to him here. Kent is blasting Joe with electrobinary waves.
Which sounds incredibly painful.
It is. Essentially, he is using dual-frequency electrical pulses to shock Joe's cellular structure, forcing his cells into a hyper-accelerated state of mitosis. So, rapid cellular regeneration. The glowing green compound acts as a synthetic biological fuel for this process.
The visual of this is pure body horror. The electrical stress and the aggressive cell turnover are drawing all the blood and pigment out of Joe's extremities. We see his skin turning deathly, permanently pale.
The sheer trauma of the electrical current strips the melanin straight from his hair follicles, bleaching his hair stark white before the chemical saturation of the green goop dyes it a vibrant, unnatural green.
Joe is just thrashing in this tub, his eyes filling with blinding stars, enduring what he internalizes as his 3rd consecutive near-death experience.
And we must ask why Kent is willing to torture a child like this. It's born of desperate, fatherly madness. Kent is using Joe as a guinea pig to perfect this violent cellular regeneration treatment.
For his own son, right?
Yes, because his own son, young Bruce, suffers from a mysterious, degenerative disorder that has left the boy paralyzed. Kent is trying to cure his own son by experimenting on someone else's.
But the universe is relentlessly cruel, and the dominoes keep falling. Kent's brutal treatments abruptly stop one day. We learn, through the hushed gossip of the nurses echoing in the white room, that Dr. Kent and his wife were just killed.
Gunned down in an alley.
Yeah, in a botched alleyway robbery right outside a theater, leaving young Bruce and Clark completely orphaned.
And while Joe is trapped in that hospital, his own father's life is unraveling out in the world. Mark, drowning in the guilt of what happened to his wife and son, has picked up a battered teenage runaway named Harley in his car.
Oh, Harley Quinn.
Exactly. They form this brief, tragic, surrogate father-daughter bond. Harley is desperately looking for a protector, and Mark is desperate for someone to fix.
But Harley is tied to the criminal underworld. She introduces Mark to her gritty reality, and through a series of tragic, wrong place, wrong time coincidences, Mark is framed for the very alleyway robbery that left Dr. Kent dead.
The system just swallows him whole.
Consumed by the loss of his family and facing life in prison for a murder he didn't commit, Mark hangs himself in his jail cell. I mean, if we view this as a stage tragedy, it's practically Shakespearean. Everyone's fate is fatally intertwined.
It is a staggering narrative web.
Dr. Kent is essentially the villain creating the monster, yet his death creates Batman and Superman. How do we even unpack this twisted butterfly effect?
Think about the physical and narrative collisions here. You have a closed-loop ecosystem of trauma. Dr. Kent, acting out of love for Bruce, physically mutates and tortures Joe, essentially creating the villain. But Kent's murder is the catalyst that will eventually turn Bruce and Clark into the world's greatest heroes.
These aren't just characters, they are colliding atoms in a very dark universe. Joe is left abandoned in that hospital, stripped of his family by the same event that stripped his tormentor of his life.
He is full of undirected chemical rage.
Permanently mutated by a man trying to save the boy who will one day become Joe's greatest enemy. Where does a society even put a creature forged by that much trauma?
They put him in a cage. The scene shifts, and we leave the sterile white hospital. The stage descends into the dark, shadow-drenched, Gothic architecture of Arkham Asylum.
Arkham is not framed as a place of healing in this story. It is visually oppressive. Heavy iron bars, flickering amber lights, constant screaming in the background. It's essentially a slave labor camp.
In sociological terms, Arkham is functioning as a behavioral sink. This is a concept where, when a population is crammed into an inescapable, overcrowded environment, all normal social behaviors entirely collapse.
They just lose their minds.
The stress of the overcrowding leads to hyperviolence, bizarre social hierarchies, and sheer madness.
And to illustrate how bizarre this universe is, let's look at who Joe shares the sink with. On the transport bus to Arkham, Joe meets Barry Allen. But in this universe, Barry isn't a forensic scientist. He's an Aboriginal Australian wildlife ranger.
Which is such a cool reimagining.
It is. Barry tells Joe his origin story, and you have to picture this vividly on the stage behind them. Imagine a massive, booming, cinematic thunderstorm in the Australian outback. A giant, unnaturally aggressive kangaroo leaps out of the brush and completely demolishes Barry's Jeep, sending it rolling into a deep gully.
Barry scrambles for his life, dives into a flooded waterhole for cover, and at that exact second, a massive, blinding bolt of blue lightning strikes the water.
But it's not just water. The pool is swarming with eels. The lightning bolt supercharges Barry's nervous system while he is submerged in this conductive biological soup. It creates a self-contained electrical storm inside his cellular structure.
He wakes up running so incredibly fast that the world melts into a blur of light, only to collapse and wake up surrounded by SWAT teams.
Back in the present, inside the dim cells of Arkham, we literally see blue static electricity continuously sparking and arsing off Barry's skin in the dark as he's strapped to his bed.
Barry's presence proves to Joe that he isn't the only anomaly. The world is full of people violently altered by impossible forces. But inside the behavioral sink of Arkham, it doesn't matter what your origin story is. You have to fight for your place in the hierarchy.
Which brings us to the most visceral confrontation of the story, the mirror room. Joe is standing in front of a cracked, grimy bathroom mirror. His face is still entirely wrapped in those blood-stained, crusty medical bandages.
And then the door kicks open behind him.
In walks James Bane. And Bane is a mountain of muscle. He is huge, brutal, and he demands to see the freak's face.
Bane represents the old-world brute force of the asylum. He grabs Joe by the back of the neck and violently smashes his face into the mirror. The glass webs and shatters.
But something has fundamentally changed inside Joe, hasn't it?
Yes, his mutated electroshock nervous system suppresses the pain. Instead of screaming, Joe just starts laughing.
The fight choreography here isn't elegant, it is feral. Joe spins around, kicks Bane in the knees, and literally launches himself onto the giant's chest like a rabid animal. Joe leans in, unhinges his jaw, and aggressively bites James Bane's nose completely off his face with his jagged, silver-filled teeth.
Bane shrieks in agony.
Blinded by the pain and the blood, Bane wildly claws at Joe's head, digging his massive fingers into the medical tape, and violently rips the bloody bandages away.
As the bloody gauze falls to the floor, we get the grand, horrifying reveal to the audience.
We finally see the true face of Joe Kingman in the dim light. It is a nightmare. Raw, scarred, pale flesh, piercing, glowing green eyes, and that deeply embedded, permanent chemical smile stretched across his cheekbones.
It's a terrifying visual.
Made even more horrifying because his permanently pale lips are now heavily stained cherry red with Bane's fresh blood. Joe just stands there, holding Bane's severed nose between his fingers like a fine cigar, laughing hysterically at the ceiling.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, to understand the psychology of this moment, we have to look back at the radio broadcasts Joe used to listen to on the farm.
Oh, the Rat Utopia thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Leroy Harvey once discussed a real-world scientific concept called the Rat Utopia experiments by John B. Calhoun. In those experiments, perfectly housed rats were given infinite food and water, but confined to a limited space.
And they just went crazy.
The extreme overcrowding created a behavioral sink, where the rats formed hyper-violent gangs, completely lost their minds, and tore their own society apart. Arkham Asylum is their rat utopia. It's a locked box, packed with monsters.
So Joe realizes he has to adapt.
In that mirror room, Joe realizes that he cannot just survive the cage. He must become the apex predator of the sink. He establishes total dominance. And as a result of that brutal bite, James Bane is permanently relegated to wearing his famous heavy-breathing apparatus strapped to his ruined face for the rest of his life.
Wow. The hierarchy of the madhouse is set. Joe is the undisputed king. Which brings us to the grand finale, the climax of the stage play. Let's look at the incredible set design for this final sequence. It is a massive split-level stage.
Up in the rafters, suspended in the shadows above the asylum floor, is a lavish, heavily fortified skyview station behind thick, mirrored glass.
Just floating up there.
Inside, the corrupt founders of Arkham and wealthy Gotham elites are drinking champagne and gambling millions of dollars in untraceable cash on an illegal inmates poker tournament happening below.
And down below, on the main floor of Arkham, it is absolute chaos. It's a glittering, deranged circus act providing intermission entertainment for the gamblers.
And Joe is right in the middle of it.
He has managed to stitch together a brand new version of his tailored curtain suit. He is standing in the center ring, dark circles of makeup hiding his glowing green eyes, and hanging high above him, swinging quietly from a trapeze hidden in the shadows of the heavy red theater curtains, is Harley Quinzel.
Harley, who is now an acrobat, has spent years infiltrating the asylum system. She's learned acrobatics, she's mastered the art of the con, and she has meticulously orchestrated this entire circus diversion to save the man she affectionately calls Mr. J.
The tension in the room is thick enough to choke on. The circus announcer calls for a volunteer from the inmates for a grand disappearing act. The spotlight frantically darts around the room and snaps perfectly onto Joe.
Perfect timing.
Harley, wearing smeared, chaotic circus makeup, glides down from the trapeze and gently guides him to the wooden stage. Hundreds of pounds of confetti start falling from the ceiling like rainbow-colored snow.
It is the ultimate theatrical distraction.
Joe steps into the upright magic box. He flashes that horrifying permanent smile one last time. The announcer dramatically waves his hands. A la Karzi, a la Karzam. He throws open the door to the box, and Joe is completely gone.
Just vanished.
He has literally vanished into thin air. The announcer stammers, looking genuinely confused. He tries the magic words again. Nothing. Panic begins to ripple through the audience of inmates. Up above, in the mirrored Skyview station, the corrupt founders realize they've been played. They start frantically stuffing their millions in cash into duffel bags.
And then, cutting through the murmurs of the crowd, is the sharp, deafening sound of cracking glass.
The reinforced ceiling directly above the wealthy founders completely shatters. Joe and Harley crash down through the glass from the ventilation shafts above, landing boots first directly onto a mountain of gambling cash.
Such a great entrance.
The elites are screaming, but Joe just dusts off his green lapels. He looks at Harley and says, "Look at all this cash. Grab what you can and burn the rest." They shove millions into the bags and scramble back up into the exhaust vents.
Leaving total destruction behind them.
And as they disappear into the metal ductwork, a massive, roaring wall of bright orange flames erupts below them, consuming the elite station and spreading rapidly. Arkham Asylum burns to the absolute ground. They emerge from the smoke and ashes as the undisputed prince and princess of crime, the joking man.
It is a stunning visual masterpiece of destruction. It's the perfect closing image.
But watching this play out, I have to wonder, is this escape actually a victory? This whole finale is pure orchestrated theater. Did Joe actually escape the cruel systems of the world, or did he just finally take control of the stage he was forced onto?
That is the brilliant, lingering tension of the ending. He hasn't escaped the cruelty of the world at all. He has just appointed himself its most violent director.
And that is exactly why painting the picture in your mind is so vital. When you picture the deep red of the crushed berries, the radioactive glow of the lime green radio, the boiling white bandages, and that rainbow confetti falling over the flames, you aren't just absorbing a plot summary.
You're living it.
You are intimately witnessing the psychological teardown and horrific rebuilding of human being. It makes the trauma so much heavier and the violent triumph so much more terrifying.
It really does. And it leaves you with a deeply uncomfortable philosophical dilemma to mull over. In the story, Joe listens to a radio broadcast about the rat utopia, that perfectly housed animals will inevitably destroy themselves through social collapse. If Arkham Asylum was their rat utopia, and our modern society is ours, are the monsters that haunt our streets born from human nature, Or are they simply the inevitable, beautiful, terrifying products of the suffocating cages we build for them?
Wow, a question that lingers in the dark long after the house lights come back up and that heavy velvet curtain finally comes down.
Until next time.
All right, everyone, settle in. The house lights are dimming. Can you see it? Our stage is set. It's a tiny cottage, right on the edge of a town where, well, nothing much ever happens. And there, center stage, is a young boy. His name is Joseph.
And this is really what our story is all about. This boy, Joseph, he's described as a true force. And where does that force come from? It's from something really fundamental, right? The basic human need to survive and that nagging instinct to question everything. So with that, let the play begin.
And the curtain rises, Act 1. We find ourselves inside the Kingman family home. You can almost smell it, can't you? A strange mix of sawdust and something baking. So let's meet the main players in this, let's call it a seemingly perfect little scene.
Okay, so look over to your left. That's Mark, Joseph's dad. He's a man of calloused hands, always fixing what's broken. Now pan over to the right. There's his mother, Helen. She's standing by an oven, and she's pulling out this absolutely perfect-looking pie. A pie she will never, ever eat. And you want to know what's in it? Lamb's brains and gravy. Yeah, right there you can just feel this quiet, weird tension on stage, can't you? The mender and the maker. And here he comes. Young Joseph runs onto the stage, and look at him. His face is just stained purple from the currants he's carrying. His mom, Helen, turns with this big, warm smile. She takes the basket from him and says, with a little giggle, "Thank you, Count Dracula. I'm forever your humble servant." It's this sweet, funny moment, but it's a punchline that's going to take years for him to really get. But, okay, this is where that seemingly perfect picture starts to crack. We get this quick succession of scenes, like a montage. We see guinea pigs, kittens, puppies, family pets. And each one meets this really grim, almost casual end. Joseph tells his dad about finding the guinea pigs literally cooked in the sun, saying all I could see were fluff balls. It's just, the tragedy is so unsettling because of how normal it all seems.
And then, listen, the sound design here is incredible. A loud, just sickening crunch echoes from the corner of the stage, from inside the dog shed. Joseph is standing there, just horrified, watching the family dog, Madison, eat one of her own puppies. And his father's reaction? Just so blunt, so matter-of-fact. The curtain falls, and you're left with this feeling of a childhood just stained by this kind of casual horror.
All right, Act 2. Big scene change. We're now in Mark's workshop, and it is a total jungle of old parts, a place where things are brought back to life. But tonight, this workshop is the stage for a gift that is literally going to change everything for Joseph. So his dad pulls off this oily cloth with a big flourish, and there it is. It's such a great way to show a father's love when he can't find the words, He can't say I love you, but he can give his son this amazing lime green box, a Boston 2000 FM radio. It's more than a gift. It's a portal to a whole new world. And what comes through that portal? A voice. The voice of a man named Professor Leroy Harvey. It's described as crisp, deep, and just irritatingly likable. You know the type. He's talking about adventures, far-off lands, a whole universe beyond their little town. And Joseph, he is completely hooked. He doesn't just listen, no. He starts to become that voice. Picture this. Joseph is standing in front of a window, looking at his own reflection. He's practicing the professor's speech patterns, his confident stance. He's literally building a new person right in front of our eyes. This isn't Joseph anymore. He looks that reflection square in the eye and says it, for the very first time. "Hello, Joe." Of course, every great character needs a killer costume, right? So Joe goes to his mom for help. And what happens next is this wonderful little scene of them, like two conspirators gleefully cutting up these awful old curtains. And the result? It's kind of a masterpiece. A reversible dark green jacket, some killer purple slacks, and to top it all off, these bright white boot covers for that, gangster look. Okay, costumes on, now for the face. We see Joseph, or, well, Joe now, sitting at a vanity, and we watch as he applies the makeup. The patchy black around the eyes, the pale white powder all over, these really strange green eyebrows. His mom is in the background, just trying so hard not to laugh as she watches her son completely transform. So, the new Joe makes his grand debut in his dad's workshop,
And his father, Mark, he just plays along perfectly. He sees this whole creation his son has become and decides, you know what? It needs one more thing. He grabs a paintbrush, dips it in some thick, black, oily paint, and says, "Happy, eh? Well, let's put a smile on that face." And just like that, he smears this huge grin from ear to ear. The character is now complete.
Act 3. The stage goes dark. We're back in the workshop. But that playful mood, it's gone. Now there's just a single, harsh spotlight cutting through the darkness. The whole feeling has shifted. Something's wrong.
So a few days pass. Joseph wants to be Joe again. He goes into the workshop, all by himself. He finds that same tin, that same paintbrush, and he starts to paint on the smile his dad gave him. But the second it touches his skin, it starts to burn, to blister and bubble, because it wasn't oil paint. It was a powerful flesh-eating paint stripper, euphonic acid.
The visual here is just horrific. They show a split screen. On one side, Joseph's face. On the other, Joe's face. You see the acid literally melting the skin down to the bone, burning that white powder and black makeup right into his raw flesh. That playful smile his dad painted, it's now a permanent, grotesque scar, a frozen mask of agony. His mother, Helen, hears the screams and comes running in, but she trips, she stumbles, and in this just awful, tragic moment, she knocks the whole tin of acid over herself. It splashes all over her face, melting her features, burning into her brain. The script says it destroys fundamental fragments of humanity from her fragile mind. The curtain falls. 2 lives just completely and utterly destroyed.
And we're into Act 4. The set is totally different now. It's just stark, cold, white. A hospital room with a single bed. And this is going to be Joe's entire world for the next 10 years.
This timeline really drives home how much time is just gone. Think about it. At 10 years old, he goes into the hospital. By 15, his hair has turned completely white from all the stress and the so-called treatments. And then at 19, they decide he's too much to handle, and he gets transferred to Arkham Asylum.
So, at Arkham, he's put under the care of a Dr. Kent, and the treatments are just brutal. Electroshock that turns his skin this ghostly pale. One day, they literally dunk him in a vat of green chemical goop that dyes his hair permanently. But here's the crazy part. Joker's mind starts to twist it all. The pain becomes pleasure. He actually starts calling these torture sessions his honeymoon period.
But see, Joker is a survivor, through and through. He doesn't just endure, he adapts, he learns. While he's locked away in Arkham, he's mastering all these new skills. He learns to sew these beautiful suits. He practices yoga to control his mind. And most importantly, he perfects his poker face. All for the big annual inmate tournament.
His face is always bandaged, and that makes him a target. This huge inmate, a guy named Bane, comes after him, yelling that he wants to see what's underneath. They get into this vicious fight, and Joe actually bites off Bane's nose. In a rage, Bane rips off the bandages, and for the first time, everyone in the asylum sees his scarred, smiling face. Joe just looks at this terrified brute and snarls, "I want to see his face on my wall. I want to know what makes this Bane rat think he's man."
Okay, here we go. Act 5, the finale. The whole stage is set for the Arkham Poker Tournament. You can feel the electricity in the air. But for Joe, this is way more than just a game. This is his opening night.
And there he is, at the final table. He's just a commanding presence. He's wearing one of his own perfect, tailored suits. His green hair is slicked back, and that permanent smile is just this terrifying contrast to how calm he seems. You know he's playing for keeps. And right on cue, the intermission's magic show is about to start. A spotlight hits the stage. This beautiful acrobat, Harley Quinzel, is looking for a volunteer for the big disappearing act. And who does she pick? She picks Joe. He totally plays along, gets right into the magic box. The magician does his thing. They open the box, and he's gone.
The magician looks confused. Tries again, box is still empty. Now you can feel the panic starting to creep in. This isn't part of the show. All of a sudden, you hear this cracking sound from the ceiling, and then smash, bang, boom. 2 figures, Joe and Harley, crash right through the roof. And where do they land? Directly on the funder's table, in a giant pile of money that breaks their fall.
It is absolute chaos. Alarms are blaring, guards are scrambling everywhere. Joe and Harley are just scooping up bags and bags of cash. They escape through a vent, and you just see this wall of fire behind them. The asylum is burning down.
Our play is over, but you know their story is just getting started. And it leaves us with that final, burning question. What does become of the joking man?